unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty. 83 days to go, and the polls themselves are becoming a news item, not necessarily for what they show, but how they get to those showings. Joining today is Jim Ellis of Ellis Insights, a frequent expert guest here on In Depth. I'm your host, Gary Michael Voris, here in Houston. Jim, something doesn't quite seem right about all of these various polls, at least a few of them. For example, there's questions about, are they oversampling Democrats to get the numbers be a little bit more Kamala friendly? They're not seeming to take into account massive Republican registrations in some states, like Pennsylvania, for example, or at least a drop off in Democratic registration. They seem to plan the timing of the release of the polls, all for like pro-Kamala stuff. Your thoughts on the growing belief that the polls are being manipulated to make it appear close enough so that if the Dems do steal it, it's going to seem believable?
Well, Gary, what type of poll do you want to see? And I can produce one for you. If you, no matter who you are, I can produce a poll that shows something that you like. Yeah. And I think we're just in a period of volatility. Every pollster is a little bit different. You have to look at them in aggregate. And what it tells me is we got a deadlock, a tie, because there are some polls that have Trump up still and some polls that have Harris up. And there's no question Harris has some momentum right now, but it's all based upon really kind of fabrication. She has not come out on purpose, not doing interviews. They're giving us all of these position changes that contradict her entire record over the past 20 years, and everybody's supposed to buy that. Let's just see how long they can get away with that. Can they sell that through the whole rest of this campaign? We're going to find out, Gary.
Well, here's one of the things that's interesting. Let's just take a couple of positions: fracking and tips. We're not going to tax tips. I mean, those are, solid Trump issues. And yet here she is sort of not only, making them her own, but sort of stealing them from Trump. And the right. She's got a giant corporate media, army behind her. So the question of, can she keep doing this? Well, she's done it for 3 weeks now. So we don't have that many weeks left. What do we have? Like 9 weeks left to go, 10 weeks left to go. So, what do you think about all of this as far as changing her positions and then having the media, be her water boy for that?
A lot depends on how things are handled. Here in those 9 weeks. There's still plenty of time, and in American politics, things change radically very quickly. And this race is still basically a dead heat. And I'm sure what the Trump campaign will do is talk about improve all of these position changes, because there's plenty of video on Kamala Harris talking about banning fracking, on her change in position on Israel now. Now, supposedly she's a backer of Israel when she wasn't before. The single payer healthcare system, meaning no private insurance. That's what she was advocating for years. Then, of course, defunding the police. And not the least of which to mention, of course, is that she was the border czar. And of course but she wasn't even that. But maybe most important of all, I think, when she and every other Democrat on the ballot in this country at the federal level, they're vulnerable on this next thing. And that is the Biden cover-up. Yeah. Covering up just how bad Biden was that the whole country saw on that debate. And they all knew that. Every one of them knew how he was acting, and he was not capable of being president of the United States, not for the next 4 years, but right now. And she knew that most of all. And therefore, I think that is going to come out too. So the whole Harris operation so far has just been based on nothing but fabrication. And how far can they get with that? You're right. The corporate media is going to back her every part of the way. They're driving that narrative. But the good thing is, too, Gary, as you know, the corporate media is not very well regarded. Most people don't trust them. So that it's important to a degree, but is it definitive for the outcome of the election? I'm not sure that it is.
Yeah, in years past, it certainly would have been. At least most of the time. Let me ask you, sort of put this sort of professional journalism thing of the corporate media, which is to say the corporate Marxist media, and compare them to what we see emerging on the over in the world of social media, particularly on Elon's X platform, sort of the citizen journalist. I mean, I'm a journalist, have been for 40 years, and, earned my stripes, all that business. Everybody watching probably knows that. And I do see an awful lot of kind of cub reporter instincts by a lot of people. Some are getting into sort of like mid-level type journalism. There's a lot of stupid stuff, certainly from the conservative citizen journal side on X. Crazy, whatever. Like, why are you bothering saying this? Go after the issues. Go to the facts. Go to all that stuff. But there are some people who are doing that. Kyle Becker, I sent you a couple of his things this morning, before we got on here, like analyzing going down into the crosstabs of the polls, New York Times Siena poll and things like that. And, there's a lot of starting to develop over on particularly on X, enough of a base to be able to challenge some of the points or lack of points on the side of the Marxist media. Question is, are they getting to the people that they need to get to? Because on, these places you have to go looking for it. It just doesn't pop up in your feed.
Right. And, you made a comment too about in the past they've been able to drive messages the media has. But I think then, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but because you know better than I. But two things are different today with the corporate media than it was in the past. And the first is, as I mentioned, the trust factor. And that is because there was always, as you know better than anybody, a liberal bias. But now it's just not even hidden. I mean, and they don't even make an attempt at objectivity where in the past they did. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, they've lost so many followers. It's not a coincidence that all these corporate media operations are laying off hundreds of people and that their readership is low and there's so many more options. The good news is there's more ways to get a message out. The bad news is the left is still in control of a lot of that from the social media standpoint, and the censorship of conservative thought is certainly a real thing and a major obstacle for Trump to overcome. And that's something we really haven't had to deal with in the past to this degree.
Right.
So it is, I think, a big factor in this election. But again, can this be sustained for the rest of this entire campaign? And there still is a lot of time remaining.
Yeah, I mean, there is what's the expression? A week is an eternity in politics, U.S. politics. I mean, what happens if somebody drops a nuclear bomb on Israel, or I mean, there's so many volatile situations right now. It just doesn't seem like everybody's going to around the world, and even in the United States to a degree, just push hold so everything stays peaceful. Kamala wins and everything can go to hell. It doesn't seem like that's a plausible reality moving forward. What do you think?
It's the perception that people have. So again, we have to also look, most of these polls, and really a national poll that we've been talking about are useless, and particularly useless right now, because that's not how the race is decided. It's decided in the states. And the key states is what we have to monitor, and the communication in those key states is what we have to monitor. And the corporate media will talk about usually the 3 Great Lakes states that they claim will be the deciders, as we've talked about. And I think there's 3 other states, Gary, that are more important than they, at least from the Trump campaign's perspective.
Sure.
And if we want to go to
I know if you have some slides and things for us. It's the Jim Ellis slideshow.
Yes, it is.
So, yeah, it's very informative. It's right there. It's very easy to follow and understand. So why don't we go ahead and do it? Let's bring up the first slide.
Well, remember now, to win this election, Trump needs to do 2 things. First of all, he needs to keep all 25 states and the 2nd District of Maine. Remember, Maine and Nebraska split their electoral votes, allowing their congressional districts to carry their own vote. So those states are important because they can cause a tie in the Electoral College. So what Trump needs to do first is make sure all 25 states and the second district of Maine that voted for him twice stays in his camp. And that looks like it happens today. North Carolina in that group is the weakest of those states, but he's looking pretty good there even now. Then he then would need to convert 35 electoral votes. So that means you have to win states that equal at least 35 electoral votes of states that voted for Biden in 2020. So the corporate media talks about the three deciders basically being Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And while they are incredibly important, I think, as I mentioned just a minute ago, there are three other states that are more important from a Trump perspective. And they are these: Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Now, in these three states, until Harris got until they removed Biden, because obviously they knew he was going to lose. And, I think President Biden made a pretty valid point when they were talking about doing that, is he had 14 million people over that voted for him in these Democratic primaries. Those people were just cast aside. And we have now this sort of Vladimir Putin style election, if you will, of Kamala Harris as the nominee, basically installed as the nominee, even though no one voted for her. So that in and of itself. So until that time, however, in these three states cumulatively since January 1st of this year, 70 polls had been published, and they're about evenly dispersed among the three. And of that 70, Trump led in 69 of the 70 in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And there was one tie in Nevada. Now, if you see the numbers there on this slide, 16 in Georgia, 11 in Arizona, 6 in Nevada. Those are the electoral votes that each of those states possess. Added together gives you 33. He needs 35. So that would put him 2 away. So the next slide we have are those decider states. And, and really up until the last few weeks, it was true that Trump would have needed to carry at least one of these states to win. And that's clearly the narrative in the corporate media right now. And it's not altogether wrong, but there now are other alternatives. And again, those three states, as you see on this board, Wisconsin with 10 votes, Michigan 15, and Pennsylvania with 19. So one of those three at that point should have gone to Trump. There are ways around that now, however, and that's the difference. That's where things are becoming more competitive. In the next slide, we have what I call the switch states. Now, all of these purple states here, Arizona, the second district of Nebraska, that's why there's one electoral vote there, the Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. All of these states had voted for Trump in 2016, but then voted for Biden in 2020. And it's among this group, and particularly Arizona and Georgia, that he has to get back in this election. So if you move, and again, Nevada voted for Biden, for the Democrats twice, Clinton and Biden, but it looks like it may be coming Trump's way now. It has to. So if you look at the next, to put this in bigger perspective, national, and here's again why those three states to me are so important for Trump. Again, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Because if he can win those three, all of a sudden the balance of the map tips in Trump's favor. Because all he needs is one of these states that are on the slide, which I got is the red states plus one. Any other one of you see any of the colored states on the board, any one of them would put Trump over the top as long as he has that base in Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And therefore, Harris would be forced to run the table on this map of all the colored states outside of Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And that's why that base of support in those three states are so critical. So look for those three states on how they are breaking. And Trump, Harris is getting in play in all those states, but at the end of the day, I still think Trump looks pretty good there. And if he does, then he's still got a pretty good chance to win this.
If I can interrupt you just for 1 second, Jim, interrupt you. I checked the Trafalgar voting polls this morning. And within the last 2 or 3 days, he's up in all three of those states, and that's Trafalgar.
And that is these are the critical base, because you see he's just 2 away. 1 away from a tie, 2 away from from outright victory. And any one of these colored states, these light blue states right now, New Mexico, Virginia, New Hampshire, they're leaning towards the Democrats. But all the purple states are toss-ups. And all Trump needs is any one of those to come his way. And his smallest and easiest path possibly, with at least the smallest path on the next slide, he can do this with just 2 states. There is a way for him to win without even carrying Arizona and Nevada. So if he carries Georgia and Pennsylvania, that's it. Because if you add up the 19 electoral votes in Pennsylvania and the 16 from Georgia, that's 35. The bare minimum he needs to win. Again, assuming he keeps all 25 states that voted for him twice and the 2nd District of Maine, which also voted for him twice. And that looks pretty solid now. So, and if you go to the next 2 slides here, I think are interesting. The next one shows us a way that Trump wins without a Great Lakes state. And again, he's got his core of flip states of Georgia, Arizona, Nevada. If he takes either New Mexico or New Hampshire, either 5 votes in New Mexico, 4 votes in New Hampshire. Remember, he only needs 2. A map such as this would elect him. Thus, he's expanded the map, which was something he needed to do. Now, what Harris is going to have to do is come into all of these states and spend a lot of money to shore up what should be a Democratic state. So that's been a real plus for the Trump campaign, that he's got other states in play, and he is not wholly dependent upon those Great Lakes states, at least one of them coming through his way. Pennsylvania being his best shot, because if he wins Pennsylvania, he's probably going to win the election, because likely Georgia would come through, and probably Arizona and Nevada. But that's what it's down to. Now, the last slide I've got for us today to talk about is what I call now the chaos slide. And this is it. And you can see how realistic this is, by the way. This map would result in a tie in the Electoral College. It would have Trump at 269 electoral votes and Harris at 269, and you must have 270 to win. So what happens? And the reason that Nebraska seat there, that 2nd District of Nebraska, which is the Omaha metropolitan area, that seat voted for Trump in 2016, but voted for Biden by 22,000 votes in 2020. However, that same constituency then in the same election turned around and reelected their Republican congressman, Don Bacon, in the same election. Here's what the corporate media doesn't mention when they talk about this district. They automatically put it in Harris's camp. Now, it wasn't Biden's camp. This district has changed. This district is not the same district that voted 22,000 votes more for Biden in 2020 because of redistricting. The Republicans redrew the map in Nebraska, as all states did, and this seat is much more Republican today than it was in the 2020 election. So Trump is very much alive to win this 2nd District of Nebraska. And if he does and carries Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, but nothing else, it's a tie. And guess what? It goes to the House of Representatives to break the tie. And that would happen after the new House is sworn in on January 3rd and before the president is sworn in on January 20th. So during that period, the House would vote. And here's the caveat. Each House member does not have his or her own vote. Each state has 1 vote. So California, with its 52 House members, they get 1 vote. But places like Alaska and Wyoming and the Dakotas and Delaware and Vermont, they have 1 congressman. They get 1 vote too. So the vote skews to the smaller states, actually, and the rural areas. And that's the beauty of this system. So win or lose the House majority, and it's going to be close either way. But it is almost assured with North Carolina right now is 7 Republicans and 7 Democrats, but those seats are going to flip to the Republicans, and it's very likely going to be 10 Republicans and 4 Democrats. That adds a seat to the Republican column. The winner is going to need 26 votes in the House of Representatives, but the Republicans are going to control 27 delegations, regardless if they have the House majority or not, because so many of the Democratic members will come out of California and New York and these big liberal states, but they only get the 1 vote. So very likely, if we get into what I would call the chaos situation of a tie, Trump's going to win because the Republicans are going to control at least 27 congressional delegations. And therefore, he's probably going to win that tiebreaker. So this election is far from over. And as you can see on this map, and again, why I think those three states are what I would call the tell states of Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, and Trump needs them all. And if he gets them all, I think he's going to have enough to win because he should have enough momentum to flip any one other place.
Yeah, if he's going
that's
to.
my rundown on this and where we ought to be looking and paying attention. And I know on our shows from now until the election, I think we're going to have these three states, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, front and center.
Sure, absolutely. I'm not sure you'd necessarily consider it chaos. I appreciate it. It's crazy. It's the whole bit. But there is a provision also that while the House picks the president, the Senate picks the vice president. And that's probably going to be controlled. Is it the same deal there? It's the excuse me. It's the state delegations, correct?
Yeah. In the Senate, each senator does have his or her own vote for vice president. So the Senate majority then becomes very important. And it does look today like the Republicans will get to 51. So you could see J.D. Vance being elected as vice president if it's the tie situation.
Sure.
Regardless of what happens in the House vote.
Right.
And if they become deadlocked in the House, and Gary, you know as well as I do, they might have a hard time keeping all these Republicans in line.
Well, sure.
Then Vance would become the acting president.
Well, and a lot of people wouldn't be so not down with that.
But then, of course, he would have to keep Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski in particular in line on that vote for president. But the interesting thing also,
let me ask you this, Jim. Hold on a
House
second.
vote,
I'm imagining a few things here as you're talking. Is there some, I'm not even sure what to call it, absolute rule that, let's say the Democrats get control of the House, well, somebody has to call that vote to order. And if the House Speaker is, Jeffries or whoever, and he just says, nope, I'm not doing the roll call for the, picking the president. I'm just not going to do it. What do we do?
Okay, then Vance would be president.
Just automatically?
Because if the Senate's under Republican control, then they're going to go ahead and vote for vice president.
Okay, well, I'm going to extend your chaos thought here and say, what if in the Senate, Collins and Murkowski are like, no way, and it's just not there, and so they just don't hold the vote. Republicans control the majority, but they lose two or maybe three who say, I'm not voting for him. Well, then they can't call a vote over there either. So you got a Democrat leader in the House refusing to do it and a Republican first president and a Republican leader in the Senate saying, well, I can't afford to because they'll vote him down. I mean, is that possible? Is that madness great possible?
Yes, that is possible. And guess what would happen then?
Speaker of the House.
So the Speaker of the House,
so he's got
Hakeem Jeffries, then would become acting president.
Yeah, so he's got every reason, presuming all of that pans out that way. Yeah. And I know we're like future tripping, as people say in therapy, but
presuming he knows that the Senate would be deadlocked, and I think they get 51. I'm not sure they get beyond that the way things are looking now. But I do think they certainly win in West Virginia, and that gives them 50-50. I think they win the Montana seat. The rest of them, maybe not.
Yeah, they don't look so good.
That would make it 51. So, and then you got Lisa Murkowski, I think, that becomes the focal point of it. Collins, say what you will, she's been pretty good on these types of major votes. Remember, on Supreme Court, she's been there. She was there on the health care bill. She's been there on a lot of other things. So she's not nearly as willing to stray on these major votes as Murkowski is from Alaska. And I think there's your biggest problem.
Yeah. I mean, well, what if you wind up with a 50-50? Since there's no vice president, there's no tie-breaking vote in the Senate.
Good point. Good point. Well, actually, I think that no, there would be.
Well,
Gary,
yeah, Kamala Harris would still be sitting vice president, right, until the 20th.
She would still be sitting vice president until January 20th. Yes. So there would be a president of the Senate.
So she could break the tie in the Senate for the vice presidential seat, which might in fact be
Yes.
the presidential seat if Jeffries refuses to call a roll in the House.
That could happen. Yes.
Now
Yeah.
your
So then
graphic
Tim Walz
entitled
would be,
Chaos makes sense.
yeah. And then Tim Walz would be acting president. And then we would be, probably we would be in forced transgender society with him
Wow.
and his,
This-
neighborliness socialism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very friendly. Very friendly. It's like the hee-haw communism.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, that's why I call it chaos, Gary, because a lot of things could happen. And even though we've seen, how many times have we seen this where Republicans have the majority, but somebody breaks ranks?
Sure. Yeah,
All the time.
all the time.
And so I'm not sure this would be any different, particularly regarding if Donald Trump is the nominee. And he would be, because keep in mind now, this is not like a vote for Speaker of the House. We've talked, I know, in the past that the House does not have to elect one of its own members as the Speaker. Now, it
Correct.
always has, but it doesn't have to. They could actually bring in somebody from the outside.
I nominate
But
you.
on this vote for president and vice president, they cannot. They can only vote for people who received electoral votes.
Right.
So it's not a situation where they could somehow bring back Barack Obama or somebody like that.
Right, right. Well, that raises a question. I don't see what state it would happen in, but if RFK won some state somewhere and got 2 electoral college votes, that actually throws him into the mix in the House for a vote, right?
It would. Yes, it would.
I don't actually
Right
see
now, that
any-
doesn't look like it will happen. But yes, theoretically, yes.
Wow. Holy smokes.
So you would have to have electoral votes to be able to be eligible to receive votes from the House or the Senate.
Madness. This is madness. It really is.
So
Hey,
from
Donald,
Trump's perspective,
Just win.
he
Just win.
needs to do better than just the 2nd District of Nebraska, I think. One more state anywhere will avoid that situation. But that's
Sure.
how we get there. That's how we get there, and it's not impossible.
Well, remember at the end of 2016, after Trump had won, that massive push, it didn't go anywhere then, but now it might. That massive push by Hollywood stars. They're rolling out YouTube videos left and right, encouraging the electors from each state to change their votes.
Yes.
I mean, this would be so, you couldn't get much daylight in between corruption and conspiracy and the actual outcome. And 1 or 2 electors change his or her vote, and all of a sudden the whole thing goes crazy again. I mean, I don't see at this point you get to like an armed revolution in the streets.
Wait, and that would be perfectly okay. But having a new slate, suggesting a new slate for a state of delegates, remember, now that's a crime. But doing what you described, which we will have a good chance of seeing, that would be fine to contest the election.
Sure.
So if you're from the right, contesting an election outcome is illegal.
Right.
But it's going to be perfectly acceptable, as we've seen in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Even back to John Kerry in 2004. Remember, he was talking about trying to contest the Ohio electoral vote.
Sure.
And that was all fine. Yeah. And Hillary Clinton doing the same thing. They wanted people not to vote and tried to change electoral votes. And that contesting the election in that matter was all fine. But the Trump people tried it, and that's jailable. That's illegal. Then you're going to jail for contesting the election. But that's what we're facing. That's the problem. That this has gotten so out of hand with the weaponization of the Justice Department.
Yeah.
That it's not going to be an even playing field if we get into the tie situation, even though Trump should win if it's a tie. But he needs to get beyond that. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, just win and bring it home. Don't park the car in the driveway, take it into the garage, and close the door.
Right.
And get your guns out the windows.
I mean, the Trump campaigns know. They know all. And believe me, they're going to be trying everything they can to do this. But they've got to get back on track. I mean, there's been too many unforced errors.
Right.
Since Harris has replaced Biden, by force.
Right. Yeah. We normally call that a coup. All right, Jim, thanks very much for those, may I say it, Ellis insights. Thanks very much. Appreciate it, man. God bless. Before we leave you, religious leaders across the Christian spectrum have so neglected their duty to the flock that men like Donald Trump and Elon Musk have become the fill-ins for them. Not a single sitting U.S. Catholic bishop is talking in terms of the end of civilization like Elon Musk is, or Donald Trump for that matter. Elon and Trump see this giant big picture, and they understand what's at stake. The bishops, for some reason, just don't, or maybe won't. How is it? How can that be? How can it be the case that men trained extensively in theology, philosophy, scripture, and history are unable to see what two business titans so clearly see? Trump and Elon get hundreds of millions of eyeballs because they say out loud what everyone is thinking. In fact, the Don and Elon discussion on X Monday night now has over 1 billion views. You paying attention, bishops? 1 billion views. And there's a reason for that. And many of those eyeballs are sitting in the pews, bishops, in your parishes. But the bishops just go on and on. They say nothing, ignoring the potential cataclysm that the two most well-known men on the planet are pointing out and warning us of. We're concentrating on the U.S. bishops, by the way, because they are the leaders of the single largest religious group in all of America. Yet their silence in the face of every imaginable evil has driven scores of millions from the church and straight into the arms of the culture of death, which, of course, has ground them up spiritually. But the reign of evil they have refused to fight, and in some cases actually embraced, horribly, also has material world consequences: inflation, homelessness, fatherless homes, on and on. Meanwhile, like their buddies they cozy up to for government handouts, they never have to worry about what the normal American has to worry about. They live for free off donations and the interest from tens of billions in endowments accumulated over the decades for the purpose of advancing the faith, not promoting social justice crap. Bishops don't think about inflation, the cost of medical insurance, rising rents or mortgages, the cost of gas and groceries, prescriptions, none of it, because they don't have to. Like their globalist counterparts, they are immune and insulated from these material world realities. Not having to worry about a household budget frees them up. They get to advance political idiocy and social justice warrior madness, as well as staying curled up under the sheets with communist globalists who long ago bought them off with your tax dollars. So when they forsake their sacred duty, their duty in the spiritual realm, it appears that God just taps other leaders who step up in the material realm. Elon and Trump are exercising natural virtue, looking at events in the natural order and just calling BS. They likely have no idea that the events in the natural order are a result of events in the supernatural or the spiritual order having gone sideways. But then again, that's not really their responsibility to bring spiritual meaning to events of the material world. Heck, neither is Catholic and one's agnostic, but they do get it, at least on some level. They get it. The bishops don't. Even with material world concerns, they are totally checked out, tone deaf, tuned out. They've been too concerned about their own personal comfort and ease and wanting to be liked, and in the process, they have forsaken the flock and, by extension, the nation. Elon and Don certainly aren't saints and fall woefully short in some of their beliefs about morality, but since the bishops refuse to care for their people spiritually or materially, well, at least we have two men who do care materially, and God bless them for embracing at least natural virtue. God love you. I'm Gary Michael Voris.